As we entered the hall at my sister-in-law's wedding, I went into labor and fell to the ground. My husband kept walking forward as his mother shouted, "Hurry up, your sister needs you." Then I woke up in the bathroom as my mother-in-law was next to me saying, "Do not create any drama, hold it in until the marriage is over." I tried to shout as I could see my husband, but her mother smilingly said, "He only does what I say, stop your measly acts." She grabbed my hair and slammed my head against the bathroom wall, adding, "Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can steal my daughter's spotlight and ruin her special day." She then locked the bathroom. A few hours later, I woke up in the hospital and my mother-in-law was begging me not to press charges, but oh boy, her face went pale when. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how my marriage imploded on what should have been a joyous family celebration. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs I ignored because I was desperate to believe that love could conquer the toxicity embedded in Marcus's family. I was wrong. The morning of Marcus's sister Jennifer's wedding started innocuously enough. I was 32 weeks pregnant with our first child, a daughter we'd already named Emma. My obstetrician had been hesitant to clear me to attend the ceremony, given that I was already considered high risk due to my smaller frame and the baby measuring small for gestational age. She'd warned me to take it easy and leave immediately if I felt any concerning symptoms. Marcus had been dismissive when I mentioned my nervousness about attending when I was still weeks away from my due date. "My sister would never forgive us if we missed her wedding," he'd said without looking up from his phone. "Mom already thinks you're trying to make everything about yourself." That comment should have been my first clue about what was coming. Patricia Reynolds, my mother-in-law, had made it abundantly clear from the moment Marcus proposed that I would never measure up to her expectations. I was a high school English teacher from a middle-class background, while Patricia had married into old money and considered herself society royalty. Jennifer, her precious daughter, was marrying a hedge fund manager, and Patricia had been planning this wedding like it was a royal coronation. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Grandview Estate, an exclusive venue that cost more than my annual salary just to book. Marcus had insisted we arrive early because his mother needed him for last-minute coordination. I'd squeezed myself into a maternity dress that cost $300 because Patricia had made pointed comments about not embarrassing the family with my appearance. We pulled up to the estate at noon, and I could already feel a dull ache in my lower back. I'd been having Braxton Hicks contractions for weeks, so I didn't think much of it. Marcus immediately jumped out of the car when he spotted his mother waving frantically from the entrance. "Marcus, can you help me out?" I called, struggling with my seatbelt around my swollen belly. He glanced back, irritation flashing across his face. "Mom needs me." "You're not helpless, Sarah. Just take your time." I watched him jog toward Patricia, who threw her arms around him like he'd just returned from war instead of a 20-minute drive. By the time I'd maneuvered myself out of the car, they'd disappeared inside. I stood there in the parking lot, one hand supporting my aching back, wondering how I'd ended up in a marriage where I felt more alone than when I'd been single. The next 2 hours were a blur of Patricia barking orders at everyone while Jennifer sat in the bridal suite like a queen holding court. I found a quiet corner in the family waiting room, trying to stay out of the way. The back pain had intensified, radiating around to my abdomen in waves. I checked my phone obsessively, timing the intervals. 20 minutes apart. Then 15. Then 12. I found Marcus in the hallway outside the bridal suite at around 1:30. He was holding Jennifer's veil, carefully draped over his arms like it was made of spun glass. "Marcus, I think something might be happening," I said quietly, not wanting to cause a scene. "The contractions are getting closer together." He barely spared me a glance. "You said you've been having those fake contractions for weeks. The wedding starts in 30 minutes, Sarah. Can you please just push through?" "I don't think these are fake," I insisted, my voice rising slightly. "They're different. More intense." Patricia appeared from the bridal suite like a demon summoned by the scent of disruption. "What's going on? Why are you bothering Marcus?" "My daughter needs him right now." "I'm having contractions," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're getting closer together, and I'm concerned." Patricia's eyes went cold. "Jennifer's wedding happens once in a lifetime. You can have contractions anywhere, anytime. Do not make this day about you." "I'm not trying to make anything about me," I protested, feeling tears of frustration building. "I'm worried about the baby." "The baby will be fine," Patricia snapped. "You're not due for 3 more weeks. Stop being dramatic and sit down somewhere quiet. Marcus, come help your sister with her veil." Marcus wouldn't even meet my eyes as he followed his mother back into the bridal suite. I stood there in the hallway, one hand pressed against the wall as another contraction seized my body. This one was stronger, forcing me to breathe through it in short, sharp gasps. I made my way back to the waiting room and tried calling my own mother, but the call went straight to voicemail. She was on a cruise with my stepfather, somewhere in the Caribbean with spotty cell service. I'd never felt more isolated in my life. The ceremony was starting. I could hear the string quartet beginning the processional music. I pushed myself up from the chair, determined to at least show my face. Maybe if I could get through the ceremony, I could convince Marcus to take me to the hospital right afterward. I made it to the entrance of the grand hall just as the wedding party was lining up. The pain hit me like a freight train, so sudden and intense that my knees buckled. I grabbed for the doorframe but missed, and suddenly I was on the ground, my vision swimming with spots. Through the haze, I felt a warm gush between my legs. My water had broken. I could hear Patricia's voice, sharp and commanding. "Marcus, where do you think you're going? Your sister needs you. She's about to walk down the aisle." I tried to call out to him, but I couldn't form words. The pain was overwhelming, radiating through my entire body. I could see him pause, turn slightly toward me, then look at his mother. She shook her head firmly, and he turned back toward the ceremony entrance. The wedding party proceeded down the aisle. Through my fading consciousness, I could hear the music, the rustle of Jennifer's gown, the murmur of guests wondering about the commotion at the entrance. Then hands were on me, Patricia's hands, dragging me across the marble floor toward a hallway. The next thing I remembered was waking up in a bathroom. The fluorescent lights above me were blinding, and for a moment, I couldn't figure out where I was or how I'd gotten there. My head was throbbing, and when I touched my temple, my fingers came away sticky with blood. Patricia was standing over me, her face twisted in fury. "Do not create any drama. Hold it in until the marriage is over." "I can't," I gasped, another contraction tearing through me. "Please, I need to go to the hospital." The baby will be fine," Patricia hissed. "You're doing this on purpose. You couldn't stand that Jennifer was having her perfect day, so you had to find a way to steal the attention." I could see through the partially open bathroom door. Guests were filing into the hall, and I caught a glimpse of Marcus standing at the altar next to Jennifer's groom, Alex. He was looking straight ahead, his face impassive. "Marcus." I tried to shout, but it came out as barely more than a whimper. "Marcus, please." Patricia's smile was terrifying in its sweetness. "He only does what I say. Stop your measly acts." Before I could process what was happening, Patricia's hand shot out and grabbed a fistful of my hair. The pain in my scalp was immediate and sharp, momentarily cutting through the contractions. She yanked my head back, her face inches from mine. "Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can steal my daughter's spotlight and ruin her special day." She slammed my head against the tile wall. The impact sent an explosion of pain through my skull, and my vision went dark at the edges. I heard the click of the bathroom lock, and then there was nothing but pain and darkness, and the distant sound of wedding music. I don't know how long I was in that bathroom. Time became meaningless, measured only in waves of agony. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my body doing what it needed to do whether I was aware or not. At some point, I heard voices outside the door, guest voices wondering if the bathroom was occupied. I tried to call for help, but only weak moans came out. The ceremony must have proceeded without interruption. Later, I would learn that Patricia had told the venue coordinator I was handling a wardrobe malfunction, and would rejoin the reception shortly. The coordinator, busy managing a 300-person event, hadn't questioned it. It was a member of the catering staff who finally found me. She'd noticed blood seeping under the bathroom door during the cocktail hour, nearly 2 hours after I'd been locked inside. She called 911 immediately, then got the venue manager to break down the door. The paramedics told me later that I was barely conscious when they arrived, hemorrhaging badly, with a premature infant who'd been born in that locked bathroom. Emma had been without proper medical attention for at least 20 minutes. They rushed us both to St. Mary's Hospital, lights and sirens cutting through what should have been Jennifer's perfect reception. I woke up in a hospital room with bright lights and the steady beep of monitors. A nurse was checking my vitals, her face carefully neutral in that way medical professionals have when they're dealing with something terrible. "Where's my baby?" Those were the first words out of my mouth, panic clawing at my chest. "Your daughter is in the NICU," the nurse said gently. "She was born at 32 weeks and weighs 3 pounds, 2 ounces. She came early and small, and there were complications from the delayed medical care, but she's a fighter. The doctor will be in soon to talk to you about everything." I tried to sit up, but pain lanced through my head and abdomen. The nurse eased me back down. "You have a severe concussion, a fractured cheekbone, significant hemorrhaging from the delivery, and some pretty substantial injuries. You needed an emergency blood transfusion. You need to stay still." Patricia appeared in the doorway, her makeup perfect, still wearing her mother of the bride dress. The sight of her made my stomach turn. "Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Thank God you're awake. We've been so worried." The nurse glanced between us, something unreadable in her expression. "I'll give you a moment," she said, though I noticed she didn't go far, lingering just outside the partially open door. Patricia moved closer to my bed, and I instinctively tried to move away. She held up her hands in a placating gesture. "Please, let's not make this worse than it is. You fell at the wedding. These things happen. There's no need to involve the authorities or make accusations that could tear this family apart." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "You locked me in a bathroom while I was in labor. You slammed my head against a wall. You were hysterical," Patricia said smoothly. "You needed a moment to calm down. I was trying to help you. And you accidentally hit your head when you slipped. The bathroom floors were wet." "That's not what happened," I said, my voice shaking with rage and fear. "Who do you think people will believe? Patricia leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. A well-respected member of this community, or a woman who's clearly dealing with pregnancy hormones and stress? Marcus will back me up. Jennifer will back me up. You'll destroy your marriage and your daughter's relationship with her father's family over nothing. Get out, I said, my voice barely audible. Sarah, please be reasonable. Get out. This time I screamed it, and the nurse came rushing back in, followed by a security guard I hadn't noticed in the hallway. Ma'am, you need to leave, the nurse said firmly to Patricia. Patricia's mask slipped for just a moment, pure hatred flashing in her eyes before she smoothed it away. Of course. I can see Sarah needs her rest. I'll come back when she's feeling more herself. After she left, the nurse squeezed my hand. Honey, do you want me to call someone? The police? A social worker? I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face. I don't know. I just want to see my baby. The next several hours were consumed with doctors and assessments. Emma was born at 3 pounds, 2 ounces, 8 weeks premature. She had underdeveloped lungs and was on respiratory support. She had to stay in the NICU for observation, and the neonatologist explained that she'd likely be there for at least 2 months, possibly longer. I had a severe concussion, a fractured cheekbone, bruising across my abdomen, and had required an emergency blood transfusion due to hemorrhaging from the traumatic delivery. Marcus finally showed up around 8 that evening, still wearing his tuxedo. He looked exhausted and annoyed. This is a disaster, were his first words to me. You completely ruined Jennifer's wedding. Do you have any idea how humiliating this was? The ambulance showed up right in the middle of the reception. I couldn't speak. I literally couldn't form words in response to the absolute callousness of his statement. Mom explained what happened, Marcus continued. You had a panic attack and fell. She tried to help you calm down, and you lost it. The doctors are saying it's hormones and stress. We can get through this, but you need to apologize to Jennifer and to Mom. Your mother assaulted me, I finally managed to say. While I was in labor. Marcus rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. Mom would never do something like that. You're confused because of the concussion. The doctors even said head injuries can cause false memories. Where were you? I asked, my voice breaking. I was calling for you. I needed you, and you just kept walking. I was standing up for my sister on her wedding day, Marcus said, as if this explained everything. You could have waited a few hours. Women have been giving birth for thousands of years. It's not that complicated. Something inside me shattered in that moment. Looking at this man, whom I'd loved enough to marry, whom I'd created a child with, I saw a stranger. Worse than a stranger, I saw someone who would choose his mother's approval over my safety, over our daughter's well-being. Get out, I said quietly. Sarah, get out of this room right now, or I'm calling security. Marcus left, and I spent the rest of the night crying and holding my phone, staring at the photo the NICU nurse had taken of Emma in her incubator. She was so tiny, so helpless, and I'd failed to protect her from the people who should have loved her unconditionally. The next morning, I had a visit from a hospital social worker named Diane. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Sarah, the medical staff has some concerns about the injuries you sustained, Diane said gently. Your chart indicates trauma inconsistent with a simple fall. There's bruising on your scalp consistent with hair pulling, and the impact to your head appears to have been forceful. Would you like to tell me what really happened? I broke down and told her everything. The whole horrible story poured out, Patricia's cruelty throughout my pregnancy, Marcus's willful blindness, the attack in the bathroom. Diane listened without interrupting, taking careful notes. I want to press charges, I said when I'd finished. But I'm terrified. My husband's family has money and connections. What if they take Emma away from me? What if no one believes me? Diane squeezed my hand. First, let's make sure you and your daughter are safe. Then we'll deal with the legal aspects. But Sarah, what happened to you was assault. It endangered your life and your baby's life. That's not something you have to tolerate, regardless of who the perpetrator is. Over the next 48 hours, Diane helped me navigate the process of filing a police report. The hospital provided detailed medical documentation of my injuries. The police interviewed the catering staff member who'd found me, and they pulled security footage from the hallway that showed Patricia dragging my semi-conscious body into the bathroom. They documented the locked door and the timeline showing I'd been trapped inside for nearly 2 hours during active labor. Patricia showed up at the hospital on the 3rd day after the incident, just as the police were finishing taking my formal statement. Her lawyer was with her, an expensive-looking man in a 3-piece suit. Security had been alerted this time, and they'd called Detective Morrison before allowing her upstairs. Her face was calm, composed, the picture of a concerned mother-in-law visiting her son's wife after a tragic accident. Sarah, honey, we need to talk about this misunderstanding, Patricia began, but I held up my hand. Detective Morrison has heard my full statement, I said, gesturing to the police officer standing beside my bed. Complete with medical evidence and witness testimony. Patricia's face went pale. You can't be serious. After everything this family has done for you, You mean after you assaulted me while I was in labor and endangered my daughter's life? I kept my voice steady, though my heart was racing. That's what you've done for me? This is absurd, Patricia's lawyer interjected. My client was attempting to help Mrs. Reynolds during a medical emergency. The security footage shows your client dragging my semi-conscious body into a bathroom and locking the door, Detective Morrison said evenly. The medical evidence supports severe assault. The victim was in active labor and trapped without medical care for nearly 2 hours, resulting in a premature birth with complications. We have the catering staff member who found the victim and called 911. This goes far beyond any claim of trying to help during a medical emergency. Patricia's composure cracked. You ungrateful little, Mrs. Reynolds, I'd advise you to stop talking, her lawyer said sharply. She's trying to destroy my family. Patricia shrieked. Over nothing. Over her own clumsiness and hysteria. Your daughter-in-law nearly died, Detective Morrison said coldly. Your granddaughter was born premature and remains in intensive care. This is far from nothing. I watched Patricia's face cycle through emotions, rage, fear, disbelief, and finally, calculation. How much? She asked suddenly, turning to me. How much do you want to make this go away? 50,000? 100,000? I don't want your money, I said quietly. I want you to face consequences for what you did. You're making a mistake, Patricia spat. Marcus will divorce you. You'll lose everything. I will make sure you never see Emma without supervision. I will drag your name through every court in this state. Actually, said a new voice from the doorway, you won't. My mother stood there, having cut her cruise short the moment she'd been able to get cell service and heard my frantic voicemails. Behind her was a woman in a sharp blazer carrying a briefcase. This is Rebecca Walsh, my mother said, moving to my bedside. She's a family law attorney, a former prosecutor, and an old college friend of mine. She's agreed to represent Sarah. Rebecca stepped forward, handing Patricia's lawyer a document. This is a restraining order petition we'll be filing this afternoon. My client is also initiating divorce proceedings against Mr. Marcus Reynolds on grounds of abandonment, neglect, and enabling abuse. He'll be served papers within 72 hours. Additionally, we have documented evidence of long-term emotional abuse in text messages, emails, and witness statements from friends and coworkers. We'll be seeking sole legal and physical custody of the minor child. Patricia's lawyer skimmed the document, his face growing more troubled with each page. He leaned over and whispered something to Patricia, whose face drained of all color. You can't do this, Patricia whispered. Marcus loves you. Emma needs her father. Emma needs to be safe, I said firmly. And Marcus made his choice when he walked away from me at that wedding. When he took your side over mine even when I was lying in a hospital bed. When he told me to apologize to you for being assaulted. The district attorney's office has been briefed on the case, Detective Morrison added. Mrs. Patricia Reynolds, I'm placing you under arrest for aggravated assault causing bodily harm, child endangerment, and unlawful imprisonment. The transformation on Patricia's face was something I'll never forget. The mask of respectability and superiority crumbled completely, revealing pure, impotent rage beneath. As the detective read her rights and placed her in handcuffs, she screamed at me. You've destroyed everything. Jennifer's marriage is ruined. The whole community knows. This family will never forgive you. Good, I said simply. I don't want forgiveness from people who think your behavior was acceptable. As they led Patricia away, still shrieking threats and insults, Rebecca sat down beside my bed. Sarah, I need you to understand what you're facing. This is going to be a fight. They'll try to paint you as unstable, as vindictive. They'll use your postpartum condition against you. Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this? I looked at the photo of Emma on my phone, her tiny perfect face surrounded by tubes and wires. I'm sure. If I don't fight back now, what kind of example am I setting for my daughter? That it's okay to let people hurt you if they're family? That money and status mean you don't have to face consequences? No. I'm done being silent. The weeks following my police report were some of the darkest of my life. Marcus moved back in with Patricia, choosing sides in the most definitive way possible. He hired his own attorney, someone from the same firm as Patricia's lawyer, and they began a coordinated campaign to discredit me before charges were even formally filed. The first salvo came through social media. Jennifer posted a carefully worded statement about how a family medical emergency had disrupted her wedding, and how she was praying for everyone involved to find peace and healing. The comments section filled with friends and extended family members expressing sympathy for her ruined day. Several people openly speculated that I'd faked going into labor for attention. Then came the character assassination. Anonymous posts started appearing on local parent forums and community Facebook groups, describing me as an unstable new mother who'd become obsessed with blaming others for her own medical complications. Someone leaked my personal cell phone number, and I started receiving threatening calls and text messages. Baby killer, one message read. You're lying about a good woman to cover up your own inadequacy as a mother. My principal, Dr. Hendricks, called me into his office during the second week of this nightmare. I'd been on maternity leave, but the school board had received several complaints from parents demanding I be fired for moral turpitude. Dr. Hendricks assured me my job was secure and that he believed me, but suggested I might want to consider transferring to a different district once things settled down. The stress affected my milk supply. I'd been pumping religiously for Emma in the NICU, but the constant anxiety and lack of sleep caused my production to plummet. The guilt I felt over this was crushing. Patricia had already taken so much from me, my sense of safety, my marriage, my belief that family meant something sacred. Now she was even affecting my ability to nourish my daughter. Rebecca worked tirelessly to build our case, but she warned me repeatedly about what we were up against. The Reynolds family has contributed significantly to the district attorney's re-election campaigns, she explained during one of our strategy sessions. They've donated to the Police Benevolent Association. Patricia serves on the board of 3 major charities. We need our evidence to be absolutely ironclad, because there will be pressure to make this go away quietly. The district attorney, a woman named Catherine Chen, met with me personally before deciding whether to pursue charges. She was in her 40s, impeccably dressed, with an expression that gave nothing away. "I'm going to be blunt with you, Sarah," Catherine said, sitting across from me in her office. "This case is going to be brutal. Defense attorneys will attack every aspect of your character. They'll suggest postpartum psychosis, false memories from your concussion, attention-seeking behavior. They'll paint you as a woman trying to destroy a respected family because your marriage failed. Are you prepared for that?" I looked at Emma's photo on my phone, taken that morning in the NICU. She'd been gaining weight steadily and the doctors were optimistic about her coming home soon. My daughter almost died because of what Patricia did. I almost died. If I don't fight this, what message does that send? That it's okay to assault someone as long as you're wealthy and well-connected? Catherine studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay. I'm filing charges. But I need you to understand, this is going to get worse before it gets better." She wasn't exaggerating. Once the formal charges were announced, the media coverage exploded. Local news stations camped outside my apartment building. Patricia's PR team worked overtime, releasing statements about her shock and devastation at being accused of such heinous acts. They portrayed her as a devoted mother and grandmother who'd been trying to help during a chaotic situation. Marcus gave an interview to the local newspaper, tears streaming down his face as he talked about how the stress of new parenthood had changed me, how I'd become paranoid and accusatory toward his family. He never mentioned walking away from me at the wedding. He never mentioned telling me to apologize to my attacker. My mother became my lifeline during those weeks. She'd retired early from her job as a nurse practitioner and devoted herself full-time to helping me survive. She accompanied me to every legal meeting, helped me field the constant barrage of negative attention, and spent hours in the NICU with Emma so I could handle the legal necessities without leaving my daughter alone. Daniel, Marcus's younger brother, reached out to me 6 weeks after I'd filed charges. We met at a coffee shop across town, where we were less likely to be recognized. He looked nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder. "I have recordings," he said without preamble. "Of Mom. Years' worth of recordings. I started documenting her behavior when I was in high school because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that the things she said and did were real. I consulted with a lawyer. We're in a one-party consent state, so they're legal." He pulled out a small digital recorder and a flash drive. "There's stuff on here about you. About how she planned to make you feel unwelcome in the family. About how she was furious that Marcus got you pregnant because it meant you'd be connected to the family permanently. About how she saw Jennifer's wedding as an opportunity to put you in your place." I felt sick listening to the clips he played for me. Patricia's voice, recorded over family dinners and private conversations Daniel had secretly captured, revealed a woman obsessed with control and status. She referred to me as that teacher girl with undisguised contempt. She discussed strategies for undermining my relationship with Marcus, for ensuring I never felt truly accepted. In one particularly chilling recording from 3 months before the wedding, Patricia was talking to Jennifer about the event. "If Sarah's still pregnant by then, make sure Marcus understands his priorities," Patricia said. "Your wedding day is about you and Alex. Not about some baby that isn't even born yet. Marcus needs to remember that his sister comes first." Daniel looked haunted as he handed me the flash drive. "I'm testifying. I don't care what it costs me. What Mom did to you is evil, and Marcus enabled it by being too weak to stand up to her. Emma deserves better than to grow up around that toxicity." Rebecca nearly cried when I gave her the recordings. "This is exactly what we needed. This establishes premeditation, establishes a pattern of hostility. The defense can't claim this was a panicked response to an emergency situation when we have proof your mother-in-law deliberately created a hostile environment for months." The trial began 11 months after the incident. Patricia's legal team was exactly as ruthless as I'd feared. They dragged up every mistake I'd ever made, painted me as an attention seeker who'd fabricated a medical emergency to ruin a wedding. They brought in expert witnesses who testified about how concussions could create false memories. They had Jennifer sob on the stand about how her wedding day had been destroyed and how the ambulances arriving had traumatized her guests. But Rebecca was relentless. She presented the security footage, enhanced and crystal clear, showing the exact sequence of events. She had the catering staff member testify about finding me unconscious in a pool of blood. She brought in my obstetrician, who explained in clinical detail how dangerous Patricia's actions had been, how locking a woman in active premature labor without medical care could have easily resulted in death for both mother and child. She presented text messages between Marcus and Patricia, showing a pattern of Patricia manipulating her son and expressing hostility toward me. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. Marcus's younger brother, Daniel, whom I'd barely known during my marriage, came forward with recordings. He'd been documenting his mother's behavior for years, trying to protect himself from her manipulation. He had recordings of Patricia discussing how to handle me, how to make sure I never felt truly part of the family, how she'd been thrilled when Jennifer's wedding date was set so close to my due date because maybe it will remind Sarah that she's not the center of attention. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Patricia was found guilty of aggravated assault causing bodily harm, child endangerment, and unlawful imprisonment. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half her sentence. The judge was particularly harsh in his sentencing remarks, noting that Patricia had shown no remorse and had attempted to use her wealth and status to evade responsibility for actions that could have resulted in 2 deaths. The divorce proceedings had been running parallel to the criminal trial, stretching over those same 11 months. Marcus had tried to fight for custody, but Rebecca demolished him in court. The security footage of him walking away while I collapsed, the text messages showing his mother's influence over him, his own words telling me to apologize to my attacker, it all painted a picture of a man unfit for primary custody. The custody hearing wrapped up 2 weeks after Patricia's sentencing. The judge granted me sole legal and physical custody, with Marcus receiving supervised visitation every other weekend at his own expense. The judge's written opinion included scathing remarks about Marcus's failure to protect his vulnerable wife and child and his continued allegiance to a woman who committed violent acts against his family. The final divorce decree was issued 3 weeks after the custody ruling, making it official nearly 14 months after that terrible wedding day. During those 11 months of legal proceedings, Marcus's attorney, a shark named Richard Pemberton, had tried every strategy to paint me as an unfit mother. In the custody hearings, Marcus sat at the defense table looking like a grieving widower, all sad eyes and slumped shoulders. His testimony was a masterclass in manipulation. Sarah was a wonderful person before the pregnancy, he said, his voice breaking at all the right moments. But something changed. She became paranoid, convinced that my family was against her. She isolated herself, pushed away everyone who tried to help. When Emma was born, I was terrified that her mental state would affect our daughter's well-being. Richard Pemberton brought in a psychologist who'd never met me but was willing to testify based on the documented evidence that I exhibited signs of postpartum psychosis and delusional thinking. He presented my police report as proof that I'd created an elaborate fantasy to explain away a simple fall. When it was my turn to testify, Rebecca walked me through every detail of my relationship with Marcus's family. The constant criticism, the deliberate exclusion from family events, the way Patricia would make cutting remarks disguised as concern. I described the wedding day in clinical detail, keeping my voice steady even when discussing the assault. Then Rebecca played the recordings Daniel had provided. The courtroom went silent as Patricia's voice filled the space, dripping with contempt as she discussed ways to undermine my marriage to her son. When the recording of her discussing the wedding came on, her words about making sure Marcus knew his priorities, I saw the judge's expression harden. "Mr. Reynolds," the judge said, addressing Marcus directly, "were you aware of your mother's hostility toward your wife?"
Marcus stammered, I knew they didn't always get along, but, yes or no, Mr. Reynolds?"
"Yes," Marcus finally admitted. "But I thought if Sarah just tried harder to fit in, you thought your pregnant wife should try harder to accommodate a woman who openly discussed strategies for making her feel unwelcome in the family?" The judge's tone was ice. "And on your sister's wedding day, when your wife collapsed, you continued into the ceremony. Is that correct? The wedding was important. More important than your wife and unborn child?" The judge cut him off. "I've reviewed the security footage, Mr. Reynolds. You looked directly at your wife on the ground and kept walking when your mother told you to. That's not the action of a man concerned about his family's well-being." Richard Pemberton tried to redirect, arguing that Marcus had been in shock, that he'd trusted his mother to handle the situation. But the damage was done. The judge saw through the performance. Rebecca then called witnesses I hadn't known would testify. Colleagues from my school spoke about how I'd been a dedicated teacher, how I'd never shown signs of instability or paranoia. My obstetrician testified that my pregnancy had been completely normal, that I'd shown no signs of mental health issues. Friends described how Marcus had gradually isolated me from my support network at Patricia's urging. The most damning testimony came from Jennifer's now ex-husband, Alex. He'd left Jennifer 3 months after the wedding, and apparently, he had things to say about the Reynolds family. "Patricia Reynolds runs that family like a cult," Alex testified. "Everyone does what she says, thinks what she wants them to think. When I found out what she'd done to Sarah, I asked Jennifer how she could defend her mother's actions. She told me that Sarah should have known better than to steal Jennifer's spotlight. Those were her exact words, as if going into premature labor was something Sarah had chosen to do maliciously. Alex described how Patricia had bragged to him privately about teaching that girl a lesson and how Marcus had called his mother immediately after leaving the hospital, concerned not about Sarah and Emma's health but about damage control for the family's reputation. The judge took less than 48 hours to make her decision after the final custody hearing. Marcus was granted supervised visitation every other weekend at his own expense, and I was given sole legal and physical custody. The judge's written opinion included scathing remarks about Marcus's failure to protect his vulnerable wife and child and his continued allegiance to a woman who committed violent acts against his family. Richard Pemberton filed appeals, of course. The Reynolds family had money to burn on legal fees. But each appeal was denied. The evidence was too strong, the pattern of abuse too clear. The financial settlement took longer to hammer out. Marcus wanted to minimize child support, arguing that I was capable of supporting myself through my teaching salary. Rebecca countered with evidence of my medical bills from the traumatic birth, Emma's ongoing NICU expenses, and the therapy costs I was incurring to deal with PTSD from the assault. We settled on an amount that was far less than the Reynolds family could afford but more than sufficient to ensure Emma had everything she needed. Marcus also had to maintain a life insurance policy with Emma as the beneficiary and contribute to a college fund. His visitation remained supervised at his expense. The worst part of the divorce wasn't the legal battles, it was watching Marcus gradually realize what he'd lost. During one supervised visitation exchange, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, he tried to talk to me. A court-appointed supervisor was present in the room with us as required, ensuring Emma's safety during the transition. "I've been in therapy," he said quietly. "Trying to understand how I let things get so bad. My therapist says I've been enmeshed with my mother since childhood, that I never learned to differentiate my own wants and needs from hers." I looked at him without sympathy. "That's good, Marcus. Self-awareness is important. But it doesn't change what you did. It doesn't bring back the moments you missed of Emma's first weeks because you chose to support your mother instead of visiting your daughter. It doesn't erase the fact that you told me to apologize to the woman who assaulted me." "I know," he said, tears in his eyes. "I know I can never fix this. But I want you to know that I see it now. I see how toxic my family was, how I failed you and Emma. I'm trying to be better." "Be better for Emma," I told him. "That's all I care about now. Be the father she deserves, even if it's only for a few hours every other weekend." Jennifer's marriage fell apart 6 months after the trial. Apparently, Alex hadn't been thrilled to learn that his mother-in-law was a violent criminal who'd nearly killed her daughter-in-law, and Jennifer's refusal to acknowledge her mother's wrongdoing created an irreparable rift. Jennifer blamed me publicly, posting long screeds on social media about how I destroyed her family. I never responded. I was too busy rebuilding my life. Emma thrived. She spent nearly 3 months in the NICU, slowly gaining weight and strength as her underdeveloped lungs matured. She came home small but healthy and determined. She's 3.5 years old now, brilliant and beautiful, with her father's dark hair and what I hope is my resilience. She'll never remember the circumstances of her birth, and I vowed to raise her in an environment free from the toxicity that defined my marriage. My mother moved to be closer to us after Emma came home from the NICU, and between her help and my own determination, I've built a stable, peaceful life. I still teach English at the same high school, where my colleagues rallied around me during the trial. I've been in therapy to process the trauma, and slowly, I'm learning to trust again. Marcus pays child support but rarely exercises his visitation rights. The last time I saw him was 8 months ago when he came to pick up Emma for his scheduled supervised weekend. He looked older, defeated. Patricia's imprisonment had apparently forced him to confront some uncomfortable truths about his family and his own complicity in their dysfunction. "I should have believed you," he said quietly as the court-appointed supervisor stood nearby, observing our interaction as required. "I should have protected you." "Yes," I agreed simply. "You should have." "Can we ever?" "No," I interrupted gently but firmly. "We can't. You made your choices, Marcus. I'm not angry anymore, but I'll never forget walking into that wedding venue 32 weeks pregnant and having you walk away from me when I needed you most. I'll never forget you telling me to apologize to the woman who assaulted me. Emma will have a relationship with you if that's what she wants when she's older, but you and I are done." He nodded, accepting this, and left with a supervisor to take Emma for the weekend. I stood in the parking lot of the supervised visitation center, watching them go, and felt nothing but relief. The love I'd once felt for Marcus had died in that bathroom at his sister's wedding, beaten out of me by his mother's fists and his own indifference. Patricia was released on parole 8 months ago after serving 2 years of her 4-year sentence. The conditions of her parole include no contact with me or Emma, mandatory anger management therapy, and regular check-ins with a parole officer. I heard through Daniel that she's living in a small apartment, a far cry from the mansion she'd once presided over like a queen. Jennifer won't speak to her, still blaming Patricia for the destruction of her marriage to Alex, which fell apart within 6 months of the trial. Marcus visits Patricia occasionally, though Daniel says those visits are strained and uncomfortable. I don't take any pleasure in Patricia's downfall. I'm not vindictive enough to celebrate another person's suffering, even someone who hurt me so deeply. But I am grateful for justice. I'm grateful that the system worked, that wealth and connections couldn't completely override evidence and truth. I'm grateful that my daughter will grow up knowing her mother fought back when someone tried to silence her. Sometimes people ask me if I regret pressing charges, if I think it was worth tearing apart a family. My answer is always the same: I didn't tear anything apart. Patricia's actions did that. I simply refused to stay silent and let those actions be swept under the rug in the name of family unity. Emma is napping right now as I finish writing this, her small chest rising and falling peacefully. She has no idea that her birth was traumatic, that her grandmother is a convicted felon, that her father chose his sister's wedding over her safe arrival into this world. She just knows she's loved, protected, and valued. That's all that matters.